Hello and welcome back to my studio. Well, we are sticking with acrylics for the time being, and we're going to look at how to get more light and color vibrancy from your acrylics. If you've been struggling with these aspects of your acrylic painting, then you're going to get a lot out of this video. Let's have a look. Now, last week we dealt with texture in acrylic painting, and there'll be some overlap here because some of those techniques will help you with your light and vibrancy. Now, some years ago I reviewed golden acrylic paint, and I touched on a subject that I've been meaning to show you in greater detail. So it's a bit longer than normal. Maybe you can watch it in installments, but you'll go through this demonstration and discover certain techniques that I've never spoken of before as well, giving you a bit more color and a kind of a graphic look to your acrylics, which can be very appealing. So without further ado, let's begin the demonstration. I'm going to walk you through the painting step by step and covering 5 main topics that will give you more light and vibrancy in your acrylic painting. Let's begin. This is the reference I'm going to be using, and we're going to create something a little more vibrant than this, starting with a vibrant underpainting to give the painting a bit more pop, as it were, and it has a big influence on the painting. Now I'm going to start off also with quite a dark outline of the mass shapes, where the shapes are going to be, and this also gives the painting almost a graphic approach, something you may recognize perhaps if you're doing posters or some type of modern art. Although a lot of these lines are going to be painted over, some are going to give a bit more structure and, as I said, a more graphic element to the painting. Acrylics do favor this approach as well, although you can do anything with acrylics really, but I tend to want to get a bit more color strength into my acrylic paintings. You could of course start in a normal fine art way and just paint the shapes and work from there with a broken color. But this is going to be a little bit of a different approach, and we'll see how it works out. One never can quite tell. But now I've got the main elements, the sky, the hills, So the next tip is use good quality acrylics, and this could be student acrylics as well. As you saw in my previous acrylics demonstration, I used Amsterdam acrylics and some Winsor and Newton student acrylics, and they work extremely well. Here I'm using golden acrylics, just standard golden acrylics, artist quality, and the difference between the two, well, a higher pigment concentration, but I think when you look at both paintings, you'll see that it's very difficult to distinguish. So here I'm creating a basic sort of gradated sky, warm to cool, light to slightly darker, and that also helps to create some depth. But I'm going to also try to bring a little more interest into the sky, mixing up some colors with the painting knife, just to help to give us some clean color. I'll put this paint down, and I may still manipulate it with the brush later on. It all depends how it looks to me. This is kind of an approach where you take a little bit of a gamble, just trying to get a violet, warm and cool violet, to suggest clouds in the sky. Purely conceptual this, because there are no clouds in the reference. And then some lights around the clouds, or at least the highlights, using titanium and yellow. A very limited palette of color, as you can tell, just the primaries, and there is green that came with the set, so I'm using some Viridian green, but that's it. You can mix any color you want, so it's fine. You can get by with that. I'd have to mix a bit of burnt sienna as the painting progresses, of course. So that sky is looking, I don't know, just a little on the busy side, but I'm going to keep on with it and see if I can just bring it down a bit as far as that busyness is concerned. I'm feeling that it may be just a little textured. So over textured, I'm going to get the brush and see if I can just try to bring those textures down a bit. Now, one of the things with painting a sky is you don't want it to have too much going on and attracting too much attention. And I'm already sensing that I should have got the brush in a bit earlier. But you can see the brush certainly helping, but the clouds looking quite static. Anyway, you try and you decide if it's going to work, if it works for you. Yeah, we need a dark, just a darker sort of cloud to anchor things a bit. I just don't like that destruction, the static nature of these clouds. And of course that means painting knife, take the paint off. Have no regrets, just carry on and fix the problem so you don't look back on it. Get out the bigger brush, clean color mixers and apply the paint so that it goes on clean as well, that you're not under mixing and get it muddy or anything like that. And creating a bit more movement here, just a sense of wispy clouds passing across the sky. Few touches of highlight, but I feel much better with that. It's quite a relief, isn't it? A few highlights and leave it alone. Don't get too caught up in that. Let's move on to the next mass shape, and that's the mountains in the background. Keeping them cool with some light. Right, there is some light hitting it, but you can see in the reference very desaturated light mountains in the distance. So you can suggest that light, but the color is not going to be overly saturated. So I'm using this sort of dusky pinks and in the shadows some violet shades. Carry that over, just block that in. And if you do a good blocking in, that's a big part of the painting done. Often 3/4 of the painting, the rest you are simply refining what you've already blocked in. The mountains taking some form, suggested shapes, a bit of interest, that light coming into it. Not following the reference 100% as you can tell, but getting an interesting shape. Now I'm going to clean off the palette so I can get in more clean color notes for the middle ground and into the foreground. Now because I've got the green, I'm going to use that instead of mixing my own greens, and it's not my favorite approach, to be honest. But since I'm going for a particularly vibrant look, I'm going to use the green but desaturated, because colors in nature are very much desaturated, as you can tell from the reference. Very dry, desaturated color. I'm already pushing those colors a lot more, making them quite bright. So getting the dark shadow shapes in, and then you can add the light side, a bit more yellow, touch of white. If it's a little too strident, you just got to knock it back a bit. And of course, acrylic white is very cool color, titanium white. Using very little of it at the moment in these trees, relying on the paints. There's just a bit of that hill at the back I've got to fill in there. So you can knock back your green colors by putting in a little touch of red. That will take the vibrancy out of your greens if they're looking a little too dominant. Trying to make the shape of the tree just a little more interesting, cutting in, showing some of the background shapes and creating a few scar holes to color temperature. Vibrancy can be accentuated with color temperature, and placing a warm and cool color next to each other creates that's an interesting relationship, something going on. The cool's frequently associated with the shadow colors, and what I'm putting in here are desaturated shadow colors, and when I get the lights in, and under sunny conditions, the lights would be suggested as a warm shape. That warm and cool contrast or relationship will make the painting a lot more interesting and appear to be a lot more vibrant. So you need to know what's a cool color and what's a warm color. The only way to really know that is putting one color next to the other and seeing if that color is warm or cool in relation to the other color. Making a bit of a burnt sienna with the yellow, red and ultramarine blue, but quite a cool dark burnt sienna just to add a little bit of variety into the shadows. Breaking up the edges, but not diffusing the edges too much, just putting in smaller shapes, cutting in here or there to break edges up. And where the light is hitting the tree, those edges will be softer because the edges will be a light color, not such a strong shadow contrast. Okay, all of this green definitely is a challenge. I so do prefer mixing my own green colors. Let's stock up on a bit more paint. Now we are going to get into the really fun part and getting some of the sunlit landscape, starting at the horizon line with a yellow ochre that I've mixed up, and it is quite cool, desaturated. I'm going to actually break that down a bit further with some light pinkish color, just pretty much a gray to suggest a distant color. Now something to add a bit of pop back there, just a sort of lightish pink. And then the pinks will warm up as they get closer and become more yellow. And in the foreground we can really go crazy with a bit of strong yellow. Now getting that middle distance already with the yellows, mixing some bit of white into it just to get that into the middle distance, and white cools it down and pushes it back a bit. Value contrast, very important for vibrancy, the strong counter change between light and dark, or shadow and light more accurately, making the lights really stand out so much. I'm just accentuating the middle of the road as well, where there's a bit of grass, but it's quite dry in the reference. Of course, I'm turning the dry landscape into something a lot more graphic and vibrant, yellows and yellow-orange. And you may ask, why is that? Besides the fact that the colors are so attractive, I'm also trying to suggest the temperature of the scene. Very warm countryside. Pinks and yellows will convey a bit of that emotional content, how you feel about the scene. Blues and violets are the complementary colors, and a classic combination of violet against yellow and blue against orange to make those bright colors stand out. Now your shadows don't have to be a flat dark color. You can vary the little shapes within the shadows to make them interesting. Dark violet, blues, and slightly lighter grey violets, things like that make the shadows nice and interesting. The core of the shadow, and then or the mass shape, like the bush in this case, and then the shadow leading from it, all help to create three-dimensional volume to the scene. That's what makes it representational and not abstract. Just a few scar holes as well, letting light through. A lot of this now is improvising, and I design the painting as I go along for these smaller touches. Now, quite a strong shadow in the foreground. There is a shadow in the reference, quite a lot more light heading into that shadow, and that's a choice you have to make. Do you want to make your shadow much lighter? Perfectly fine to do that. As long as it still looks like a shadow, that's not a problem. And this is the approach I'm using is very much a typical graphic design type of approach. Dark and light contrast and color between bright colors, warms and cools, are given a lot more prominence. A bit of burnt sienna in a sort of a shadow value. Softening that edge just a bit so it's not quite as stark as it appears. Just pushing this shadow across a little further than you'd see in the reference, taking it over the middle path. Shadows in the foreground are also useful for composition as a way of leading the eye into the scene, kind of a step over the shadow and into the light. As sort of an orangey, burnt sienna perhaps, definitely more of a lighter orange for the sunlit road. Bit cooler back there, and then a little warmer as we get closer to the foreground. That just tries to help push the road down into the distance. Very easy for your road to look like it's going up into the sky instead of into the painting. So use color temperature to help with that as well. Cooler in the distance and warmer in the foreground. Completing the blocking in with the shapes of the shrubs on the left. Now these are a bit dark. I would like to just soften those up a bit. Make them softer edged as well, so they don't draw too much attention. Well, that's the blocking in stage done, and from this point on it's refining, adding a few smaller shapes, turning a large shape into something that has a few broken color shapes to it. And of course the reference is now less and less important. You're now committed to the decisions you've made. Well, certainly I am, and now I've got to basically live with those and refine the painting. Just a suggestion of light and whatever's going on in the distance there, just merely suggestions. A few dots and dashes, and that could suggest a farmhouse or some water, just picking up the reflections in the distance. Little things like that, quite fun to add those. They add a touch of authenticity. And I'm also looking for ways to break up shapes in the foreground that are perhaps a little too rigid, a little too uniform. I think the objective, though, of turning this kind of washed out scene into something bold, colorful and vibrant, that is certainly working out. Now I'm adding little accent colors, highlights and darker accents. Once again, breaking up shapes, adding little sparks of interest, suggestions of grass, maybe just catching the light, and little dark accents in the distance. Suggestions of one or two twigs or tree trunks. You don't want to do too many of those, but a few do help with creating a bit of structure, just kind of helping the eye to figure things out and pick out one shape from the other. Some light coming through, hitting a tree trunk, That's an excuse to add a little touch of orange in amongst some dark shadow shapes. Joining up a few shadows, making them look a little more, I would say, structured. It's not good to have many shadows all over the place. That can be very distracting. You end up with a painting that looks like it's covered with leopard spots. That's also wrong. You also don't want your painting to have so many shadows. It looks like a zebra stripes all across the foreground. So be aware of those little problems. You may just have to get rid of some of those shadows. Edges, finishing off a painting, you've got to be conscious of the edges of your painting. Too many hard edges, you've got to get rid of some of those. Keep the hard edges on your focal point, and elsewhere try to soften them. Here I'm actually breaking up shapes and connecting shapes with a few grass shapes, just little connecting highlights. Bringing a touch of light into that dark mass of the tree. Not too much. So now you've seen the steps taken to create a vibrant acrylic painting, and not too much involved. All you've got to really think about is how can you push the color temperature. How can you create good value contrast, especially in your focal area? And that will pretty much take care of it. The thing you want to desperately to avoid is what I was doing with the sky earlier on, and I had to clean that up, is just getting too much color. And with acrylics, it can start looking messy very, very easily. You want to keep your color notes clean and simple. Yeah, these posts, fence poles, adding a bit of a vertical element that just connects shapes, creates a little bit of structure, but doesn't overdo it either. So those clean color notes, mixing your colors, putting them down in a way that they're going to have their vibrancy. And this means also cleaning your brush off throughout the process. You don't really see me do that in the demonstration, but if your lights get darks mixed into it, you've got to scrape that off your palette and get back to clean color mixes on your palette. Make sure your brush is wiped off or cleaned off in the water jar. Use clean water as far as possible. Right, let's sign it off, have a look, see what can do with a little extra touch-up. These final shapes are very intuitive, personal, whatever you want to call it. It's just to get myself satisfied that maybe the edges are softened up here or there. There's a spot of interest where I want there to be a little more interest. Sometimes I also see the acrylic paint has dried and it's not as vibrant as I wanted. I will go back in and give it another layer. But for the most part, I find acrylics, if you have put down the color cleanly at the start, they dry just fine. I don't have too much of a problem with how acrylics look after they've dried. It is the mix that you put down that's the critical part. Basically your color mixing and your brushwork. Just got to re-establish that dark there a little. At what point do you stop? I'd probably cut down the brush right now and the painting would be fine. But sometimes you just want to clean up a shape. Rather try, if you've got an idea in your mind, try it out, see if it works. I'm trying to get this foreground shadow just a little more interesting. It was just looking a little too dark. I think it's fine. Always looking for more light. So when you look at the reference and you may be thinking, how can I possibly change a painting so much? Well, it's one of those things that you must decide at the beginning is, what is your goal? Do you want to make this? I wanted to make this a heat-filled scene full of light and color, and I think that's been achieved. And it certainly shows you the possibilities when vibrancy is a key concern. Well, I hope that deeper dive into this acrylic painting has given you some inspiration and a few techniques to bring into your next acrylic painting. You can do so much with acrylics that is very different to oils. The more graphic look to the painting is something I find appealing with acrylics, and it is easier to achieve. For some reason, I just feel like getting that stronger color vibrancy out of my acrylics. So try that in your painting. Boost the painting. Give it something extra. Just desaturate your colors a little so they don't look like they've all come straight out of the tube onto your canvas. Alright, I've got acrylic painting for beginners and advanced acrylic painting course on my painting school. If you want to visit my painting school, you can start with a free course for you up here. Also a link in the description. Check it out, see if it's a good fit for you. And you may want to join me on those acrylics courses as well. Before I go, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. There's plenty more like this coming your way, so you don't want to miss that. Last word, enjoy your acrylic painting, and we'll see you soon. Cheers for now.